Hello, welcome to A Peace in Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Gorley, and this is the podcast where you get to hear me read my novel of Peace and Precipitation, episode by episode, chapter by chapter. And then, if that weren't enough, you get to then get into the mind of the author, the crazy mind that is my mind, where I talk about some of the inspiration, some of the troubles with writings. This is my first book I ever wrote, and different things that are somewhat interesting. And today's episode is especially interesting because this is the first time where our character Jen goes to school. And I know a little bit about school. I went to school for a long time, possibly too long, but regardless, I went to school for a long time. And I am actually a teacher. I've been a teacher in inner city Cleveland for the better part of 15 years. And it's actually been pretty good. There's been some times where it has not been as good, but I've actually kind of love it. I'm actually an English as a second language teacher, so I get the opportunity to teach people from other countries English and meet them and really just care about them, and really it's actually a pretty enjoyable experience for the most part. But I've had many different people I've taught over the years, and I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot in my time. You know that whole substitute teacher Key and Peele skit where he says the name like Balake D Nice. That's for real. It really is like that. Actually, taking attendance, and that is real life. And it only it's not just with the urban population, but also with population from other countries. It's also like, what? Your name is what? It's kind of crazy, but it is awesome. And I'm actually going to talk about after the episode, after the chapter is written, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the experiences that I've had that were some inspirations for the story. But before we get too into that, we're going to read Chapter 2. Chapter 2. Breakfast was cold. Cereal, just the way Jen liked it. This way, her mom couldn't burn anything and then be upset when Ronnie and Jen wouldn't eat it. Lena wasn't a terrible cook, but she could easily be preoccupied with other things and forget about something burning on the stove. Or could slip her mind to add essential ingredients such as salt or sugar. When she was on, though, Lena's cooking was quite good. As Ronnie tipped his bowl to his mouth and drank the rest of his cereal-flavored milk, Jen wondered what she would do this weekend. Hopefully, she could go to Morgan's house. Morgan's house was like therapy for Jen, a refuge from the craziness of her own home, especially in the summer when Robbie Sutton, Ronnie's friend from down the street, would invade the Morris household on a daily basis. Her little brother would even act even more ridiculous than usual. Mom, I think I might spend the night over Morgan's house tonight. Jen, you're supposed to be grounded. But plus, you have a dentist appointment in the morning. Mom, I was only grounded yesterday, and you didn't say anything about this weekend. And my appointment is next Saturday, not this Saturday. No, Jen, I'm pretty sure it's tomorrow. You were just at Morgan's last week. Mom, it's next week, and I was only at Morgan's to do some school shopping. Jen, I know your appointment is tomorrow. Mom, check the calendar. Lena walked over to the calendar and brushed her index finger across the week to Saturday's date. Then to the next Saturday. Well, okay, but I know it was this weekend. I think I wrote it in the calendar wrong. Mom, you didn't. It's next weekend. Call the number. Jen pointed to the dentist's card stuck to the almond-colored fridge by a pink pearlescent butterfly magnet. As Lena stood by the fridge, Jen re-noticed her mom's pretty blonde hair. Lena was about 5'5", curvy with pretty features. Despite being barely 35, she had this way of dressing 20 years older than she actually was. While she didn't have much money to spend on clothes, it was more how she wore the clothes than the clothes themselves. She would tuck in shirts that shouldn't be tucked. She loved sequins and lace and even managed to find them on t-shirts. She would always wear her pants so high on her waist that it almost seemed like a joke. She had a collection of nurses' shoes that looked like they were either from 1970s nurse supply store or 1980s prom. She always had a strange accessories that somehow looked old but not in a cool retro hipster sort of way. Lena also had this funny habit of wearing eyeshadow that matched her shirt. It made her pretty face oddly colorful. It was as if she was a pretty woman that was stuck inside a costume store. No matter how much Jen or Lena's sister Julie tried to help her with her look, Lena would say, "That's not my style." Lena seemed to be the only person on the planet that could accurately describe what that was. Lena checked each digit as she dialed the number and asked the dental receptionist when Jen Morris's appointment was scheduled. The frown that followed told Jen that she was right. "I'm sorry, Jennifer. I really thought your appointment was tomorrow." "No, it's okay. So I'll probably come back and get some of my stuff before I go to Morgan's." "Okay, but I might be at the grocery store when you get home. I have to stop after work and get a few things." "That's fine, Mom. Just remember we only have $83 in our bank account. So don't spend any more than $60. Despite being fully eligible for the State Food Assistance Program, Lena refused to sign up for it because, as Lena's mom used to tell her before she passed, you have to work for everything you get. Jen thought this was ridiculous since their family really did need the assistance. "I thought we had more than that," Lena answered in disbelief. "No, Mom, not after we paid all the bills. That has to last us until next week when you get paid. So don't buy $70 worth of groceries if you still need gas in your car for next week." "The bus is here, the bus is here, the bus is here," Ronnie interjected, his voice becoming more and more song-like as he spoke. Grabbing her books and bags, "Okay, Mom, I gotta go," Jen said. "Love you, Jennifer. Love you, little Ronnie." "Love you too," Jen answered nonchalantly. "I'm not little," Ronnie protested, yelling over his shoulder. "You'll always be my little boy," Lena yelled back as Ronnie ran down the driveway to the bus. The bus was a means of transportation and nothing more to Jen. Some people really enjoy riding the bus, talking and joking with their friends until they get to school. Jen was not one of those people. Jen didn't mind the actual bus too much, but it was just the people on the bus. Jen and Ronnie sat towards the front, Ronnie with Robbie Sutton and Jen by herself. Ronnie and Robbie were a funny pair to sit next to each other. They were best friends with similar likes, interests, and personalities. But they were so different physically, you wouldn't even know they were in the same grade. Ronnie was slightly small for his age, and Robbie was what Jen described as freakishly tall for only being in 5th grade. Robbie was about 3 inches taller than Jen, and since Jen was about 5'7", that put him at about 5'10" at age 11, and made him about 9 inches taller than Ronnie. Jen enjoyed being alone with her thoughts in the morning. Ignoring the more obnoxious students in the back of the bus and just staring out the window was calming for Jen. Now that she was in high school, Jen was less annoyed by the students in the back of the bus and more annoyed. From time to time, they would call out to her. The culprits were usually one of two guys, both small for being in 11th grade, but big for riding the bus. They would either make fun of Jen for what she was wearing or accuse her of being too good for them and inevitably call her a nerd for sitting towards the front. Jen learned early in junior high to ignore the people in the back of the bus instead of humoring them or responding to them. This morning they were focused on the release of the newest Elder Scrolls game update, and Jen was left to peacefully put her knees on the seat in front of her and slouch back against the dark green vinyl seats and watch the sunlight filter through the trees and houses along the route. She soon became preoccupied thinking about school. It was a little intimidating being in 9th grade with so many students so old and usually more mature than Jen. Jen wondered what it would be like to be a senior. There would be no one to look down on you because you were too young or to laugh at you if your clothes were in the newest style. You would run the school and be the top of the food chain. As much as Jen was ready to be done with 8th grade, there was something nice about being the oldest and coolest students in school. Now, as a freshman, Jen felt insignificant. The bus stopped and Jen stepped across the graded rubber floor down the center aisle. She hopped down the 2 steps and headed to first period class. First and second periods usually flew by due to pure busyness. Massive amounts of classwork and homework made first period algebra go quickly, even if it did take half the period for her brain to fully function. English was all grammar this early in the year, which meant that there were 30-some sentences that had to be rewritten correctly. Mrs. Gannon threatened that she would add 5 sentences per complaint after some of her students whined that their hands ached. Jen's class quickly quenched their complaints upon hearing that yesterday's fifth period class received 50 sentences. Even Jen's hand ached after correcting the 30 compound complex sentences. She was relieved her class was smart enough not to complain. Jen got to spend time with Morgan during third period. It was the bright spot in her schedule. Even though world history wasn't all that exciting, Morgan made it worthwhile. Morgan and her were nearly inseparable in junior high. They had almost identical junior high schedules and sat by each other in every class but one. Jen and Morgan shared most interests and had similar quick wit and sarcastic humor. After spending most of the summer together, Jen was disappointed to find out that Morgan was only in 2 of Jen's classes, and one of them wasn't until the next semester. They didn't even share the same lunch this year. Morgan slipped into room 203 just seconds before the bell rang. Jen noted that Morgan looked very stylish this year. Her blonde hair cut shorter with uneven layers of pink streaks and strands that lay perfectly across her face. She looked as if she could be a rock star. Jen felt that Morgan's hair made her own straight brown shoulder-length hair seem a little bit boring. Morgan had always dressed more chic than Jen. She always had a bit more money to spend on clothes, and her tastes were trendier than Jen's. Morgan was self-assured and confident, while Jen didn't really wear makeup and tended to feel awkward in social situations. Jen was grateful for Morgan and her keen fashion sense. Morgan was happy to help Jen pick out new clothes, even with a limited budget. Today, Morgan looked especially good with her ripped, thin but not quite skinny jeans and sky blue American Eagle t-shirt. Jen felt a little cooler just by sitting near Morgan today. Mr. Harris was teaching about the various continents in world history. Same stuff, just going into a little bit more detail than Mr. Good taught in 6th grade. Although Jen thought world history was somewhat interesting, all she could think about was hanging with Morgan after school, and when she would be able to ask if Morgan could have her over. Morgan almost always wanted to hang out with Jen, but once in a while Morgan's mom would plan some family activity, and even Jen wasn't allowed to tag along. Even though this only happened a couple times a year, Jen was scared that this would be the one weekend that she wouldn't be allowed to come to Morgan's. As Jen's mind wandered, the other students' minds seemed to wander too. She began to notice more and more people talking to their neighbors. Still, she didn't want to be interrupted when she finally got to Morgan, so she waited for Mr. Harris to finish. Finally, Mr. Harris ceded his lecture to the talkative class and gave the homework assignment. Morgan quickly turned to Jen. "Oh my gosh, could that be any more boring?" "Morgan, say that quietly. Mr. Harris might hear you." "I hope he does. Maybe he'll finally make the class more interesting." Jen laughed. "I didn't think it was that bad, but I do have something very important to ask you." Morgan gave a little laugh and said, "Okay, shoot." "Oh, and are you coming over tonight or what?" "Oh my gosh, I could cry. I'm so glad you asked. I needed to have BFF time tonight." Morgan laughed and responded, "Jeez, Jen, you act like you never see me." Jen noticed a boy staring, almost drooling at Morgan. Morgan noticed Jen's strange look over her shoulder and turned to see a boy wearing a black Metallica t-shirt gazing at her. "Can I help you?" Morgan responded with the right amount of attitude. "Yeah, I have a question. Were you in Camp Rock? It's an old Disney movie." "Yeah, I know what it is," Morgan interrupted. "No, I wasn't in that movie." She added, annoyed. "You sure? I swear I saw you in that movie. You look like you want to be a rock star," the boy said with a mocking smirk that rivaled the Cheshire Cat's. "Yeah, and you definitely look like a movie director. What's your name?" "Jordan." "Okay, good. I just want to know so when people ask me who the annoying kid is in world history, I can tell them Jordan." Jen laughed and even clapped in admiration of her friend. "Camp Rock! Woo!" Jordan said obnoxiously loud while putting his rock fist in the air. Mr. Harris looked up from his desk, rolled his eyes, and shook his head, annoyed by the pointless and loud interjection. Morgan turned around to ignore him again and said to Jen, "What's wrong with these kids?" "I think that's what all the teachers are wondering." So that was chapter 2. I can pretty easily visualize all this happening in class. I've seen a lot of different things in the classroom, interactions, just like these kids that literally want to get attention, and they do so by being annoying. One of the favorite lines that I wrote on that in the whole thing is that he said that Mr. Harris ceded his lecture to the talkative class. I think I've seen it so many times, and I think I've actually been the teacher as well. Where teachers basically like, oh my gosh, they're talking, these kids won't shut up. Fine, I did my teaching. I'm just gonna stop there. I don't feel like fighting with these kids to like try to get them to pay attention anymore. I'm just gonna let them like have like the rest of the period. Especially in high school, like where you have like periods and only have like 7 minutes left of the period. And a lot of times teachers are like, oh, I want to talk for like 4 or 5 more minutes, and but I don't feel like fighting with them for these last 7 minutes. So I'm just gonna give them this time. I didn't really plan on giving them that much time, but I give. Like, I don't want to argue with these kids anymore. So I think I've been on both sides of that, where I was probably the talkative student once upon a time, and there's been times where me as a teacher, I'm like, okay, screw it. I don't feel like arguing with you guys. I probably do that less so like in elementary, but definitely when I was like a substitute teacher, or when I briefly taught high school, it was a little bit like that for sure. But yeah, it's really interesting. I have this big repertoire of like classroom interactions I've had over the years. They're just so funny. Like, this is ninth grade. Everyone's like in ninth grade in the story. I think it kind of says it in passing, but eventually they talk more about how she's a freshman. But middle school, I remember middle school was always such a crazy thing. Middle schoolers are these little people trying to figure themselves out, and they're like their own people now, and they're kind of learning what you can and can't do in normal social situations. So they act kind of obnoxiously, and it's definitely not unheard of that ninth graders also share a lot of those middle school tendencies as well. I remember one specific story I'll tell. I was in Cleveland at a school, not at the school I'm at now, but a school before where I had a long-term sub position for a 6th grade class, right? And I remember one day there was this kid that was really nice. He was a cool kid. I really didn't have any problems with him, like very little behavior-wise. Like the most, like maybe he would get into a fight with another kid, or like argue, or maybe they got into an actual fight at recess. But in my class, he really was like fine. Like, I think he, sometimes just being a male teacher in a school with lots of female teachers, sometimes kids kind of relate to that really well. Sometimes the opposite effect, honestly. Sometimes people don't like the fact of a male teacher, but for the most part, it usually helps me that I'm just a little bit different than some of the female teachers. So this kid, we were in class, and he just like wasn't paying attention or something. I'm like, hey, I honestly don't remember his name, but I was, I'll just say bro. But I said his name, I was like, bro, like, you got to pay attention. Come on, you got to get to work, stop talking to your friends, whatever. He's like, why? I was like, because we're in class as we do it. And he's like, well, I don't want to. I was like, well, you need to do it anyways. He's like, well, I'm not. I'm like, well, if you can't, we start kind of like arguing back and forth. Finally, he's just like, F you, Mr. Gorley. And he literally, like, of course I'm Mr. Gorley at school. But he literally just screams like the 6th grader. He's like, F you. And he didn't just say F. He actually said the whole word that I'm not going to say in this podcast. But he literally like F you, Mr. Gorley. And I'm like, dude, get the hell out of here. Get the heck out of here, whatever. I don't even know what I said, but I was like, get out of here. And I kicked him out of class, whatever, right? And just like, dude, what in the world? Like, what's going on with this kid? Like, he isn't usually like that, but whether he's usually like that or not, I don't take that in class kind of thing. And it was wild because the very next day, and this is just like a microcosm of what 6th graders like, what junior high is like. The very next day, this kid is like, comes into my room, and he like, and one of the ways I'll backtrack a little bit. One of the ways that I deal with students is like, okay, we had issues yesterday. Today's a new day. Okay, like I don't like try to hold that against them. Even I'm like, I definitely remember. But I don't try to hold that against what the students are. I'm like, all right, today's a new day. I'm going to pretend like that didn't happen, and I'm going to treat you with kindness and respect again. Okay, that's just kind of how I do stuff, right? And so I just pretended like that didn't happen. Very, very vividly remembered it. But I didn't say anything about it and just kind of treated him like normal and had no issues in class. And then like towards the end of the period, bro comes up to me in class and was like, Mr. And like literally like he looks like he's about to cry. I'm like, dude, what is he doing? Like, why is he like angry? Like what's going on here? Like, why is he looking like about to cry? He goes and he's like, Mr. Gorley, Philip won't be my friend. And then he like starts like crying. And I don't even know the kid's name. I don't even think it was Philip, but I literally remember. But it was so crazy. I'm like, like I'm just like almost like laughing. Like, bro, you sound like a kindergartner like right now. Like, you literally sound like a kindergartner. That you're literally crying because one kid, quote unquote, won't be your friend. Like use the same. Like, I mean, what like I normally wouldn't care, but it just was so ironic that here's this like dude that was like so tough that he wanted to like tell me like F me to my face like in front of the whole class. He's so tough that he can do this, and the very next day he's like crying because the kid, quote unquote, won't be his friend. You know, like I don't know, it's so ridiculous, and I'm just like, you know, and you know, part of me like, look, that's real life. Obviously, we're all sad when when someone is not our friend. That's not like a there's nothing wrong with that emotion, but it's just so funny that here's this kid that in one sense was so tough. He wanted to like, cuss me out in front of the whole class, like, like a big, how tough he was, blah, blah, blah. And then these like very, very less tough, more sensitive thing of the friend. And who knows what these kids are dealing with and stuff for sure. And I like I said, inside I was laughing at this kid like, are you freaking serious that this, you were so tough yesterday? But I was like really nice to him at the time. Like I really responded so nicely. I was just like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm sure he's just going through some time. I'm sure he's still your friend, or, you have lots of other friends. Don't worry." Like I was like super nice to him and stuff like that. But inside I was like laughing at his face. Kid, you think you're? No, I'm just kidding. But it was just like crazy, whatever. So yeah, I have all these different things that are going through my mind. I'm like writing. Oddly enough, even though I've spent really only about 4 years in high school, most of the time when I'm writing this book, like I'm picturing me in my like high school growing up. Like I'm picturing that like every classroom is the original Geneva High School where I'm from originally. And I'm picturing like the inside of like the Geneva High School, like the 1960s interior. I'm picturing just like the hallways and like every classroom. I think that this particular like episode, I'm actually picturing like the classroom that I took. I think it was actually like 10th grade, like geography, history, whatever, social studies. I'm actually like picturing that, and I think that's what you do when you write. Like you obviously write from what you know, so you kind of have these different things. You can picture that, and it was good time. It's wild with how that all works. It's interesting to see like the different friendship aspect. We're starting to kind of get her interacting with her friends. And one of the things too is that like I think it's interesting, and just the interesting thing about life is that she talks about how she was really excited to spend time with her friend Morgan. I feel like we all like that's just a human experience that like I am excited to go hang out with my friends, right? Like even as an adult, like even as a grown up, like like I'm literally like excited to like, we're coming off of a Ohio State championship in football. Woo woo, go Bucks, go Buckeyes. Anyways, but all throughout the playoffs, I had some like buddies come over, and I'm like literally excited that day. I'm like looking forward to like hanging out with like having some of my guy friends over and like watching this game, eating some food, and I'm like legit like more like super excited about that. And I remember even like more so when I was like in like a kid in middle school or high school, like I really look forward to like hanging out with my friends and stuff. And that's something that this girl Jen really appreciates and loves. One of her favorite things about life, especially because sometimes things at home can be difficult, so she is really looking forward to that. So but I think that's just something that we all kind of share, that we look forward to having those times, at least times with our best friends. I know not everyone's super social. I'm probably more in the social end of things where I do like socializing a lot. But even like my wife, who's not as social, there's a select few people that she really enjoys, spending time with. and really she's actually become more social as we've gotten to know each other. But I think everyone can experience that, like those close friends you like really look forward to like spending time with. So, and I really look forward to spending more time with you as an audience in the next episode of Peace and Podcasts. We're getting to Chapter 3 and some of the drama that is happening there. So, on behalf of Peace and Podcasts, I wish you a wonderful day and enjoy. And we will see you next time.